throughout Cuyahoga County. These events help educate businesses on the benefits of hiring individuals with disabilities, as well as give them direct access to qualified candidates to fill open positions within their businesses. The Employment Collaborative has helped with over 1,000 hires in its history. The service delivery team is bringing you this Lunch and Learn today, and that is myself, Nancy Seidel, Bob Rosanti, and Melissa Elias. And this year, our other two Lunch and Learns will be held on September 19th and December 12th. December 12th will be our presentation on benefits and how they're affected by wage income, like Social Security, SSI, and SSDI. As well as we're going to have a co-presenter from the Stable Account for Ohio, from the Treasurer's Office for the state of Ohio. Today, our presenter is Paige Jennings. Paige is with the USCRI, which stands for the U.S. Committee for Refugees and Immigrants. And she is going to be presenting the refugee and immigrant experience in the workplace. We'll be getting some background information and some definitions. We'll be getting some benefits and difficulties of job search for the typical newcomer. We will talk about how USCRI supports newcomers in job search. Also getting some information about some of the difficulties or barriers that newcomers with disabilities experience as they come to the U.S. And then also some resources that will be helpful to you in the work that you're doing. The U.S. Committee for Refugees and Immigrants was established in 1911 as a non-governmental, not-for-profit international organization dedicated to addressing the needs and rights of refugees and immigrants in all 50 states, El Salvador, Honduras, Kenya, and Mexico. Their mission is to protect the rights and address the needs of persons in forced or voluntary migration worldwide and support their transition to a dignified life. USCRI's programs include children's services, residential care, refugee programs, the Cleveland office, located on Fulton Road near downtown's West Side, has been welcoming newcomers to Cleveland, Ohio since 1916. Refugees settled in Cleveland come primarily from Afghanistan, Bhutan, Burma, Burundi, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Iraq, Nepal, Somalia, Syria, and Ukraine. Services provided include employment, housing, and interpreting, legal, health and mental health, as well as social services. Now I'm going to turn it over to Paige Jennings to give us more information about the refugee and immigrant experience in the workplace. Thank you, Paige.
Hi, thank you, Nancy. Hello, everyone. It's good to be here today. I'm here to just present on the refugee and immigrant experience in the workplace. I am the program coordinator of what's called the Matching Grant Program here at our Cleveland office. I am one of 3 different employment programs that we run here to help our new arrivals find employment here. So I wanted to start off the presentation by just explaining a bit of the differences between what a refugee is and other types of immigration status is. So refugee means it's a person who has a well-founded fear of persecution due to their race, nationality, social group, political affiliation, or religion. These are the primary groups that we work with, and they have gone through a legal process to resettle here. My employment department works directly with our resettlement and placement team that works on picking people up from the airport, finding them housing, and getting them established. And then my team will come in within a month to establish them with employment services and introduce them to the American workforce. The big difference here between refugee and most other statuses are that a refugee has done their paperwork and processing and background checks overseas, and they've gotten permission to be in this country and to work legally before anything else. Well, asylum seeker, they might also have a well-founded fear of persecution, but they have not proven their case to the United States government until they have already arrived on U.S. soil. So an asylum seeker will be here. They might not be legally able to work, and they have to wait for the U.S. government to approve them, even though they're already on U.S. soil. Refugees are able to work basically as soon as they land. They're legally, they have the documentation for that. That's a big question we get from a lot of employers is, do we have to sponsor the people if we work with immigrants? Through our programs, we have to work with specific statuses and people who have them. And basically, if you go through our programs, you do not have to worry about the legality about that. But yeah, so that's the difference between a refugee and asylum seeker. We also work with special immigrant visas, which, similar to the refugee population, they've gotten their documents and everything together overseas before they arrive here, and they also get resettled by our resettlement and placement team. The SIVs are a special immigrant that is either from Afghanistan or Iraq, and they were granted a visa to come to the United States because they worked together and allied with U.S. forces in those countries for at least 1 year. And with SIVs, one of the differences is within a few weeks of their arrival, they will be getting their green card. A parolee, you will see what's called a parolee status with a lot of Haitian and Cuban immigrants, as well as Ukrainian immigrants. We do have some Ukrainians that go through our official refugee process, but it's not quite, it's much more significant with the parolee status that you'll see Ukrainians have. So that means that they have an urgent humanitarian reason to leave their home country. Often a parolee will have their legal documents to work here. It's a bit different because under a refugee status or asylum status or SIV, those are permanent residence statuses, and parolee is a temporary placeholder. And if someone here under a parolee status wanted to stay here long term and continue working in the United States, they'd have to apply for asylum. I do hope I'm explaining these carefully enough because it can get a little confusing. Permanent residents, they basically have a green card, and that is usually with a refugee status, you have to wait 5 years before you can apply for your official green card and be a permanent resident. Not non-resident alien, they're not a U.S. citizen, they have not gotten their green card yet. And then newcomer, that just refers to everyone who has come to the United States, regardless of their status. So I wanted to clarify a few of those terms. Because there are certain statuses we work with and certain statuses that we are not allowed to work with. You can go to the next slide. So just a bit more about the refugee status specifically. I wanted to explain a bit more about this because that is that's the main and primary population that we work with our agency. So this, understanding a little bit of this can also help you understand some of the challenges refugees will go through when they search for jobs here in America. So basically the way the screening process works is a refugee has a a situation where they're being persecuted or there's a war, there's violence in their home country. Typically, what happens is they will leave that country into a neighboring country. Like, for example, someone in Democratic Republic of Congo, there's a civil war going on. They will leave and they'll go to Uganda, where they will be safe. And Uganda will say, you can stay here temporarily. We'll set up a refugee camp for you, but we don't have the resources to take in all these people as citizens. So what happens from there is they wait in a refugee camp until they figure out if they are coming to the United States of America through one of our resettlement programs, or the United Nations might send them to another country that also has a resettlement program. This has quite a different time. The timeline is very large, and it can differentiate between different countries and different places around the world, and what the U.S. government will accept and what they won't. At the top of this graphic here, it says the screening generally takes between 12 and 18 months. That is just the screening process when it has been decided, okay, this refugee from this camp is going to come to America. Then it will be 12 to 18 months of screening with security checks, Department of Homeland Security interviews, medical screenings. The FBI is involved, Department of Homeland Security. It's one of the most thorough background checks you can get if someone has a refugee status. Yeah, that's just the screening process. Before the screening process, there are people who I've personally met people who have waited up to 20, 25 years just sitting in a refugee camp in a tent, unsure of where they're going, no real ability to work. Food is just provided to them. And so that's why I explain all of this. They're the people we work with, they have been thoroughly screened, they are safe, they're trying to flee persecution. But when being introduced into a workforce, that's a big shift from you were sitting in a tent for 20 plus years to now you're living in America and you have to pay bills. So that's one of the main challenges, and that's why I explained the screening process to you today. You can go to the next slide. Common challenges in a job search. I've personally seen how employers will automatically write programs like ours off, or just immigrant workers in general off, because they're like, oh, they think, making an assumption like, oh, they don't speak English, or we don't have the resources to sponsor someone. Just misunderstandings with a lot of those challenges, and an employer will say, this is too complicated, we don't want to work with this, go find someone else. So that's a lot of advocacy that takes place on my part, and as well as my coworkers, to educate and help people understand more. Just maybe you won't, if we continue this education, we won't be turned away or automatically written off. Lack of understanding for legality of hiring. So because of all the different terms, legal statuses, it is a lot, and it can get very confusing. So employers get kind of nervous about that. Along with that, transportation. When people come, they're very new. They need to either they can't learn how to drive, they're going to have to navigate the bus system before they are able to do that. So finding employers that are able to be on the bus line or help with that, or if there's a community support within a certain cultural group that will give each other rides to work. There's a technology divide. Depending on which country of origin a refugee has come from, some people have come from having office jobs in their home country and having a substantial amount of education and skills, and they know how to use computers, connect to Wi-Fi and everything. Other people from other countries of origin have little to no experience with technology. As we know in this world, when you're searching for a job, in the world of LinkedIn and Indeed, and online applications, that is, you need technology to find a job these days. So that's a huge barrier for a lot of our clients. Assimilating to workforce and schedule. This is why I presented on explaining a little bit about the refugee process, to go from living in a camp for years and years and years to now you're here and you have to be at work at 8 a.m. on Monday morning and Monday through Friday and just continue in that process and paying bills and things. It's a lot to adjust to, and it can take some time for someone to learn and to adjust. So there does need to be a little bit of patience on everyone's end when you're employing people from different backgrounds. The American dream versus reality. A lot of people who come here, a lot of the refugees I meet, their first days of work, they're like, when can I start a job? Like, I've been waiting in my camp. I haven't had the ability to work. I really just want to come here in America. I want to work, and I heard that this is the place where my dreams can come true if I just work hard enough. And then when they're in a job and they start working and all this motivation is here, they start out very happy and then they realize, oh, maybe my paycheck isn't enough to pay my bills. And there's a lot of discovery of just the different challenges and barriers that come with what the reality is of living in America versus what they thought it was and what they were dreaming of when they were in the camps. So, and childcare, that's also a very big challenges with our clients. A lot of the refugee population, majority of it consists of mothers and children. So adjusting to that and how do I start working but take care of my children, which is something everyone kind of struggles with as they adjust to working and parenthood. So you can go to the next slide. Benefits of hiring refugees. So when we found employers who are patient with us, willing to work through some of those cultural dynamics and challenges, it has ended up creating a great benefit. People tend to stay where they are hired. Retention rates are good. When refugees lose their homes and personal property due to war or persecution, they have a strong desire. They come here with a lot of motivation. They're like, when can I start working? Like, can you find me a job tomorrow? And they may have arrived yesterday. So there is a lot of motivation there. And most recently, we had a large employer partner that we've been working with since January. For their specific department, their turnover rate with previous populations was close to 100%. And since we started working with them in January and they started hiring our clients, they said the turnover rate went down to just 13%. And that 13% of clients from our place that have left the job, it was due to medical reasons. It was not due to having issues or lack of motivation to work. It was something that was out of everyone's control. So it's been really great. Actually, the problem we have is that I run into the most is once we have an employer and we hire a bunch of people, it works out great, and then those people don't leave, and then that employer says, we're at 100% capacity, like we're fully staffed, we don't have any openings, unfortunately. And so we're stuck with, okay, now we have to find another employer who's open to finding people and getting to be fully staffed. So yeah, there's lots of benefits to that. And availability of employees. Yes, we Currently under our administration, we are resettling quite a few refugees. Um, USCRI is one of uh, 3 different resettlement agencies in Cleveland, and our current capacity has been 625 people for this fiscal year from October 2023 to September of 2024. So hopefully with the new election around the corner, we are hoping that um, things are a bit up in the air with how many we'll be receiving next year. There's a lot of unanswered questions, but if we continue to have politicians who approve this program, we can continue increasing capacity and bringing more people here, and that means more people to fill job openings here. And also just community and self-sufficiency. So hiring refugees can set people on a path to self-sufficiency and can strengthen families and communities as a whole. You can go to the next slide. Immigrant employee rights. This is something I try to let employers know. I try to let clients know about. Everyone's is it legal to hire this person? Can these refugees pass an I-9? And the clients who come through our department, yes, they can pass it. But if you are ever unsure of if you're doing something legally, do you have all the right documents on file? This Immigrant Employee Rights has a hotline you can call to confirm that with lawyers. IER, it's a department under the U.S. Department Civil Rights Division, and it protects the rights of immigrant workers specifically. They have a hotline for a worker. So if you are an immigrant and you are trying to work somewhere and an employer is not sure if your documents are valid, or you feel like your documents are valid and the employer is saying they're preventing hiring you because of it. You can call that hotline to get advice, to report anything. And then if you are on the employer side and you're thinking, I would love to hire this immigrant, I'm not entirely sure if their documents are legal, you can call them and say, hey, I need help sorting out if this is okay. Do I have things on file? But it's a great resource. They're open from Monday to Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. And you can get that information and that assistance through them. So I let everyone know about it that I can. They also have a website where you can get trainings and webinars on what are the rights that immigrant employees have, and am I abiding by those? Immigrants can also go there to get educated on their rights in the workplace too. The next slide. So some common documents that you might see if you employ people through resettlement agencies like ours. The first is a Social Security card. Refugees do have them. They will apply for them within a week. And by the time they're in like their second or third week in the country, they will have their Social Security card. So by the time a refugee is getting ready to apply for jobs and things, like they will have it. And that's one document you can use to pass an I-9 with. There's also an I-94. It is to the side of the Social Security card example. These are documents that can be found online. It's also something that can prove that someone is authorized to work. It would show their passport number, their last name, their first name. A refugee from our agency should be able to provide that to you. And if not, you can always look it up online if they're able to provide you with their alien number. The photo on the very right corner, it's blurry. It's called a refugee travel boarding letter. This, when somebody comes with a refugee status, and it basically takes the place of a passport if they're unable to have one before they travel. And it's often a refugee's only form of photo identification before they're able to get established and get a state ID or a driver's license. This can also be used as a document to keep on file to pass the I-9. This boarding letter will have the whole family. That's why you see 3 different blurry pictures on there. And underneath each person's picture will be their information. And then on the bottom row, you will see an employment authorization card. This is something that someone with a refugee status should be getting within 6 months. It's not, despite the name employment authorization card, they do not need to wait for it to pass an I-9 and start working. It's just an additional form of photo identification. Once they have it and they want to apply to another job, or for some reason they don't have a job yet and they've been there for 6 months, they could use that as one of their identifying documents for an I-9, but it's not needed. Most refugees can pass an I-9 with just their social security card and their I-94. But again, because these immigration, that's what the rule has been since I've been in refugee resettlement in 2016. But immigration laws are always changing. So if you need to be absolutely sure, you can call the Immigrant Employee Rights Division to be sure when you're onboarding someone. I can go to the next slide. USCRI support. So when you come through one of the resettlement agencies, specifically at USCRI, we provide case managers through my program's called Matching Grant, and my coworker Jacob runs our Refugee Support Services program. They both handle employment, but people have a case manager on the back end who can help with transporting clients to their interviews, helping clients understand their onboarding things, or if you need an interpreter specifically for onboarding activities, we can schedule an interpreter for that. Applications, a case manager will be doing check-ins with a client. There's one that's mandatory within 2 weeks of employment that we check in both with the client and with the employer just to see how things are initially going, if there's any additional support that needs done, and follow-ups. We'll follow up with the client throughout their time in our program. For Match Grant, the case management services last about 8 months. For RSS, it can last between 1 and 5 years. Yes, so we do offer interpreters specifically for onboarding and one-time follow-ups for things. If you need an interpreter for being on site for a full week of training or something that's consistent, we could connect you with our interpreting and translation department. The onboarding and one-time follow-ups would be free through us, but something that's more consistent, you need someone on the ground consistently, we would have to connect you with our interpreting department, as that is a paid service, but they can negotiate a contract and prices for that if an employer is wanting to do that. Public transportation, we do provide our clients with bus passes, and we train people on how to use those buses. Job readiness trainings, we've been offering job readiness trainings for new arrivals, just to assimilate them to the workplace, let them understand, like, hey, this is what you should expect. If you're working full-time, that's going to be about 40 hours a week. This is what overtime means. You're going to receive something called a pay stub and a paycheck, and this is what it should look like. And just all those little nuances that maybe someone who is born in this country would just take for granted or overlook, or just know about. Someone who's new to this country might not know what a pay stub is. They're just like, oh, that's just a random paper someone gave to me. What is that? So we explain some of those nuances in there. We have an occupational therapy team that has been working with some of our employer partners. So, for example, if somebody's doing housekeeping in a hotel and you're having issues with the way that people are cleaning rooms, or there's an issue with timing in and timing out on your punch cards. We do have OT specialists who have gone in and worked with the client on how to physically use punch cards or um, uh, um, meet a standard to cleaning a room. And they basically model behaviors to help refugees if there's any issues. And they are a great support for that. And we also have ESL training, so English as a second language, to help people learn English when they first arrive in the country. So yeah, again, there are 3 different employment programs at USCRI. Mine is called Matching Grant. I'll work with new arrivals their first 8 months in the country. Refugee Support Services is another program that helps with job placement, and even after they go through Matching Grant, if there's a problem a year or 2 later, they can still come to RSS, Refugee Support Services, to get either a better job, or if they're in between jobs, they lost one job and are trying to gain support for obtaining another one, they can go and get those same, similar case management services with that. We also have what's called an Employee Engagement Program, or EEP. This program is newer. It does not help with initial job placement, but what happens is they work with employers in the area who are already have employees who were placed through our refugee programs, and they're working on helping those refugee employees move up and get promoted from within those agencies. So they have a case manager that will work on creating a plan for, okay, you started off as a housekeeper, how do you become a manager or head of security somewhere? And they really they focus on more advancement and not so much initial job placement. Common challenges once employed. Again, there's when you're escaping your country through a well-founded fear of persecution, you have what's called trauma brain. So there's a lot of things that could happen in someone's head when they are in a dangerous situation, and all of a sudden they're in America and their lives are not in danger anymore. There might be some mental health challenges that they'll still be working through, things that from the past that could come up. And this can lead to some forgetfulness. Sometimes there's complications with maintaining a standard and just adjusting to a new work schedule and things like that. I say all this to just, when you are working with a refugee population, there has to be some patience and understanding with that. And just acknowledging that when you are working with these groups. Reasonable accommodation, that's a major thing that is difficult to work with, that we personally have difficulty working with employers. If there's a client who needs to advocate for themselves in the workplace, if there's a medical condition, often we need to prove these with medical documentation. while refugees do go through health screenings before they come here, sometimes the health paperwork will be in a different language, or it will be very basic health information that's mostly focused on making sure people have their vaccines and don't have any transmittable diseases. If there's something wrong with someone's leg and they can't stand for long periods of time, there's not a lot of documentation on that. So being able to prove that with HR representatives once the refugee's in the job, that can be that's a challenge for someone. It's a challenge for someone with a disability here in America to get those reasonable accommodations. So it's just an additional barrier. Adjustment to American standards, and again, loss of the idea of the American dream. It's yeah, but while these things are very big challenges, that's another reason that the case managers will follow up, that we still work with our clients even after they're employed, to just provide those supports when things do come into place. So you can go to the next slide. Yes, again, refugees with disabilities and employment, medical documentation, it's probably the biggest challenge when they have documents that are in another language or they're not detailed enough. If there's a refugee that could apply for supplemental security income, which new arrivals, they are able to access SSI. They are not able to access SSDI. But when they do apply for SSI, there's almost always something that's not detailed enough, some kind of documentation that needs extra approvals. Also, just getting a refugee established in the healthcare industry to get those documentations or new appointments for doctors to sign off. That can take quite a long time. There's, again, extra barriers with transportation. If there is a disability, finding accommodations for that through RTA, through if there's like a wheelchair or something to get someone in, and somebody wants to work, getting someone to their job. There's just all around, it's hard enough for a refugee without a physical disability to learn the bus system, but when there's a disability, that's just an additional barrier. And also just on our end, lack of predictability with who will arrive and what conditions may develop after being in the U.S. It's very difficult to prepare for that on a month-to-month basis on what are we going to be taking in and what accommodations they'll need in the workplace. And again, I emphasize the conditions that may develop over time. Maybe there wasn't something found overseas and then something happens or is discovered once they're here. So yeah, those are very common. Next slide. But yeah, overall, I wanted to end a bit with this visual on just the idea of supporting refugees in the workplace. Overall, when the patience is had with our employers, when people are not automatically written off throughout time, it has been very beneficial to the employer overall. Retention rates are very high, but just an encouragement that this can be really great if there are employers who will work with us and be open-minded towards that. And also just be mindful of your workspaces. Is there anything that could be done to create a better condition for other cultures or things? And it's not an easy thing to diversify your workplace, but uh, it's worth the challenge. The benefits outweigh the cost overall is what I would say. You can get to the next slide. And to end, I just put together some of these resources if you'd like to learn more, whether it's just about different refugee populations, just have resources for, hey, I want to employ a refugee, what do I do for this? So you can, or just keeping updated on different things around the world and refugee and how it might affect refugees coming into this area in this country. So first, I provided a link to Refugee Services Collaborative. This is an agency that USCRI is a member of. Basically, any nonprofit in the Cleveland area who works with refugees and immigrants, they come together to share resources, put on events, and hold meetings. And that is just the link to their website. For backgrounders, that's CORE. You can Google that. They're a great resource to figure out just different cultures. If you're like, oh, I want to learn more about Ukrainian culture, there'd be a backgrounder, like one pager information on things that are relevant in that culture, in that place, the languages they speak, traditions they might have, and just key things to be aware of, maybe when you're interacting with someone of a certain culture. Omniglat phrases, that is a good place to go to find just common phrases in all different languages. So if you just want to say hello to someone or welcome them in their home language, that's a resource you can go to learn a quick phrase or something that is put together for you. Tarjimly, so this is probably my favorite app or resource when working with people. This is a free interpreting translation app that will connect you with either text message or in-person video interpreters that you can talk to in real time. And it's basically a group of interpreters from all over the world who are volunteering their time to do this. Just a disclaimer, if you are they have a free version. If you use the free version, that's often volunteer interpreters, so it's nothing that I would use if I'm explaining legal paperwork, onboarding paperwork, benefits to a refugee. But if you need to talk to someone to say, hey, we need you to be here at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning instead of 10 o'clock, to come in a little bit earlier, just everyday phrases like that, it's a great resource to use. And they also have a monthly subscription you can buy to get access to those professional interpreters if you would like a resource to explain more official paperwork to someone. Again, United Nations Humanitarian Center for Refugees, UNHCR, has a news page. You can stay up to date on different crises around the world and just more informed. If you hire a refugee from a certain part of the country and you're wondering why are they here, I'm just kind of curious about that. They might have a resource that it could explain a bit of background on what's going on. There's also USCRI. We have a Get the Latest page on our national website that's talking about just different humanitarian crises and policies to advocate for in our country. And if you're at all curious about just the refugee resettlement process and what that might look like, I always recommend Bhutan's Forgotten People documentary. It is a two-part video series by Al Jazeera that follows a family from the country of Bhutan who was in a refugee camp in Nepal, and they follow the first video is the refugees talking about their life in the camp, what brought them there, and a little bit of their history of the conflict that resulted in them needing to be in a refugee camp. And then they have a part two of the family literally boarding a plane, going through a brief cultural orientation in the camp, boarding a plane, and then they flew to Rochester, New York, and their first month in the country, and you get to see their resettlement caseworker walk them through different things, introduce them to their house, and then you get to see the family reuniting with other relatives who came to Rochester, New York before them. Right now, we do have a lot of Bhutanese in Ohio and a few neighboring states like New York. But most of those camps are almost emptied out. They have been for a few years, so we're not resettling quite as many people from that specific culture. But I still recommend it as a good way to get visuals and an idea of just the process of what people go through from all different countries, even today. But that is my presentation.
Thank you, Paige. We do have one question, and if anyone else would like to put a question in the Q&A box, go ahead and do that now. The first question that we have already waiting is the 30 million displaced mentioned in the slide a worldwide number?
Yeah, so actually in the video, in the visual slide where it said 30 million, I looked up the statistics. So the visual is a few years behind. If you go onto the United Nations Humanitarian Center for Refugees, this is a specific number talking about people in refugee camps seeking official refugee status. It's about 36.4 million as of mid 2023, and the number is likely to have increased even since then. But yeah, that's specifically towards refugee status. As far as displaced people in general, that number is much higher. It's about, I believe it was 101 million, because there's just different statuses of people that might be displaced, internally displaced, which means they might still be within their country of origin, but just in a different region of it because of safety. And then there's also people who are escaping their country and they don't have an official documentation.
Thank you. We do have a second question, and the question asker is asking if you would be able to share your email address
Of
or
course,
if you
yeah.
have a method of them reaching out.
I'll just type my answer in there.
Perfect. All right, great. Give it a couple more seconds here to see if we can get any more questions in the queue. So you mentioned that Tarjimli is good for just common phrases and being able to communicate, but not necessarily communicating for any kind of legal documentation or human resources information exchange. Um, how would an employer reach out and get a more official interpreter or translation service
Um,
to
Yeah,
have?
so if you're hiring through the matching grant program or the RSS program here at USCRI, we do offer interpreters for the onboarding process. If you're looking for a more professional interpreter, we have what's called the Language Bank here at USCRI. That is a paid service. I can actually I could put in the chat box our contact at the Language Bank if you're interested in that. And Tarjimli does have a paid feature of the app. I believe it's about $25 a month where you can get professional interpreters. It's just the free version of the app that has the volunteers. But let me grab that contact information and I'll put it in the chat for you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
I don't have anything else open yet. I did have a question. So I know that like staff through my agency, Ohio Means Job, sometimes it's a hard time making phone calls and making contact with individuals, even though they might have an interpreter available for the call. What are some other ways to communicate with someone that might be effective to do follow-up and to get things scheduled?
To follow you, do you mean with an interpreter or just with like our agency or
With someone we
what?
might be working
Sorry.
with who's come in through an agency referral. Are there any other
Oh, so
resources?
um, as far as like a free resource, I only know of Sergeant Emily to do the interpreting. Something that's on demand on call like that. Uh, we have a language bank. I shared the ones through USCRI. I do believe that like Catholic Charities, Maydugan, other refugee agencies would have their own version of a language bank and would be more of a themed service. So
Okay, thank you.
yeah, there's
All right, I don't believe we have any more questions at this time. Well, we will go ahead and start to wrap up then. As you can see on this slide, we have some information about the Benefits Bridge program. I brought it up at our last big meeting of the Employment Collaborative Cuyahoga County. The Benefits Bridge program is a new program available to people who have recently started working, wage income, and they may be receiving food assistance, SNAP, or they may be receiving child care assistance through the county. There's a variety of different supports and funding available to that individual to help them bridge the gap between um, employment, but also losing some of those benefits that they've been supplementing their household income with. And that Benefits Bridge program, the presentation will be on an MS Teams meeting. That meeting will be next Thursday from noon to 1. If you are interested in participating in the Benefits Bridge info session that we're having, the person who will be presenting for us is Andrea Turi, but you just need to email me, Nancy Seidel, and I will get you put onto that MS Teams and get you the invite for that. My email address is Nancy, Nancy .Seidel at jfs.ohio.gov. All right. So thank you everyone for attending our Lunch and Learn, our second Lunch and Learn for the year 2024. Like I said, we'll have the info session next Thursday, the 27th from noon to 1, and that'll be on MS Teams. And then also we do have another Lunch and Learn that's coming up in September on the 19th. And then our last Lunch and Learn for the year will be December 12th. Barb Judah from LEAP will be presenting about Social Security, SSI and SSDI benefits and how wage income will affect them. It'll be just in time for all the new information that we're going to have from the federal government about the changes that we'll be seeing to some of their work incentive programs. And then also we'll have Elena Bowers from the Department of Treasury for the state of Ohio to talk to us about the Stable Account program, which is a savings account for individuals with disabilities. She'll talk about who's qualified for it and how much can be contributed and what the benefit of a stable account would be. So thank you, everyone. I'm glad you were able to join us, and we will see you on September the 19th. Thank you.